Let's talk for just a minute about workers' compensation claims. Okay, this is not really my expertise, but what I am going to talk about is something that it's going to be from my experience, my opinions, my knowledge, and I think that this is a good thing if you have a driver on work comp that could be a long-term work comp. Let's just use the example: a driver gets in a motor vehicle accident. Not his fault, he's in a crash. And he goes to the doctor. He's not hurt too bad, but he has soft tissue injuries. And they put him off work for 3 weeks. So while they're off work for 3 weeks, they go home and they get to sit around and watch TV, eat pizza all day, and they still get a paycheck, because the way the law works in most states, every state that I know of, it's going to be at least pretty close to this. You have to get their average weekly wage. Some states say for 13 weeks and 26, 52 weeks, whatever that state says, you have to get their average weekly wage from there. Figuring out that wage, and now you have to pay them 2/3 of that a check, that amount for every paycheck, every week, every pay period, whatever. So now this driver who is sitting home, eating pizza and watching the big game every day, he's just getting a paycheck to do this, and really, you know, why would you want to ruin a good gig like that? A lot of drivers don't want to, and I've seen them through the years. I've seen a lot of times they'd come up to the office, and tomorrow's going to be the day they need to go see the doctor to see how they're doing. I'm ready to get back to work. But they go to the office or to the doctor the next day and say, "Doc, it hurts when I do this," and well, you're off for another 3 weeks. So that's one of the things you have to watch for, and no telling how long you can wind up paying that indemnity check to them until they decide they want to get better. So light duty, modified duty, a lot of people call it, I always thought it was very effective. I would have the doctor write off their restrictions. I would find a job within their restrictions. Now let's just, for instance, we had shops where I was safety director over, and usually a big old yard full of trailers. And for instance, some of the things we might do is have them go out there and this arm's in a cast. We take this good arm out of the tire bumper and check the tires and check to see if the tread's good on them, report whether or not they need to be replaced, report that to the shop. They can be out there at the safety lanes cleaning lights, but they can be doing something to keep them occupied for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so that usually, I found that usually what happens is after they've done this for a week or two, if they're actually getting better, then when they go to the doctor, they're going to say, "Hey doc, I'm ready to go back to work. I want to get back to doing what I know to do, what I do best." They won't be doing that, "Hey doc, it hurts when I do this," kind of thing. So I found that was very positive. Now, one thing about this is you will most likely experience that the work comp carrier is going to want you to pay a minimum wage to the driver out of your pocket while they pick up the rest of the indemnity. That's what they always did with us, and I was good with that. Over the last couple of years, when I've been more of a consultant as opposed to the one who had any say-so over what's happening here, I talked to people about, you know, how I think that this is a great thing, and they did not want to pay the minimum wage out of their pocket for a driver who was coming out and just finding something to do. But I think it's going to be well worth your while to pay that minimum wage, and if you can get this worker, this doesn't have to be a driver, it can be a construction worker, whatever the case. If you can get them back to doing their normal duties in 3 weeks, as opposed to getting them in 10 weeks, then it's going to be way to your advantage, especially at the end of the year when the loss runs come out and it's time for your renewal. It's going to look a lot better on your loss run. So one of the other things, if for some reason you don't have a shop or something, or maybe in my case, a lot of times the driver did not live near one of the terminals or live near the shop, get with your work comp provider. A lot of times they can find, for instance, a Salvation Army or some sort of nonprofit, and they'll put them to work. I found Salvation Army's big on that. So they'll put them to work and doing something that's kind of menial, but they have to be there all day. They're doing something productive. And again, you're going to pay the minimum wage while the insurance company picks up the rest. And usually you're going to get them back to work a lot quicker. My recommendations if it's a trucking company, A, don't get them into safety where they can get a hold of driver files. They don't need to be doing anything with driver files because there's too much sensitive work in there if they're not going to be permanently stationed in the safety department. Other things, sometimes it can backfire if you're going to make them a dispatcher, because now they get sitting down there, they're the dispatcher, and well, I'm the dispatcher, I'm the boss, and they don't want to go back to driving a truck. So those are my recommendations about light duty. I think it's a good thing, and I believe my personal opinion from my experience is very positive. I remember when I first got, I'm going to tell you a quick story here about a lady named Vera. I thought this was funny. When I first got off the road, I drove a truck for a long time, and when I got off the road and went into the safety department, a long story, I think I have another video about that, but I went into the safety department, and I was in there one day, and I walked by, and Vera handles our, the company side of the work comp stuff, dealing with the work comp provider. And I walked by her, and she was, she wanted to explain something to me about this driver who was on work comp, and she goes, the EE is going to get an IME so we can determine if he's at MMI. I just smiled and left the room. Had no idea what she was talking about. Doesn't take long, kind of picked up the lingo, the EE, the employee, going to get an IME, independent medical exam, to see if he's at MMI, the maximum medical improvement, which kind of what has to happen if your guy's got an attorney and to settle. Talking about an attorney, the one thing, if they haven't already done it, nowadays they can sprain their ankle and they're going to get an attorney on you. But one thing you have to watch for, the driver who's happy sitting at home might not get an attorney. In fact, I've heard recently that some of the things they do now is they wait until they're at MMI and they're supposed to go back to work, and that's when they get their attorney. But anyhow, let's change that subject. The one thing you have to watch for about the light duty is people can sit home and get a check all the time. Usually they're happy doing that. When you call them in and you say, okay, you have to do this light duty, this modified duty, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you're still going to get your indemnity check. We're going to pay minimum wage, and the insurance company picks up the rest of the 2/3 of your paycheck. A lot of times if you have the kind of driver who nothing's my fault, everything's your fault, the whole world's out to screw me, then they're going to go to the law firm of Bob and Bob, attorneys at law, and sue you. But there's not a lot you can do about that. Stay in touch with your work comp provider. So anyhow, these are my thoughts on light duty, some call modified duty. I think it's a good thing. Most of the time, just be careful, stay in touch, work with your work comp provider on how it's properly done. Danny Drummond, Tips and Tales of a Trucking Safety Director. See you next time.